All right, it's currently 3:14 p.m., just 14 minutes after the trade deadline has officially passed, and this is now my third time recording this video because I feel like I was way too confusing in my previous two attempts. But can you blame me? Because not only has it been a wild week in the NBA in general, but the last 24 hours for the Miami Heat have been very insane. There's been a million moving parts, so that's why in today's video, I'm going to try and do my best to explain where the Miami Heat are after the trade deadline. So in totality, I'll make it very simple. The Heat ship off Jimmy Butler, they lose Josh Richardson, and we now have Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, Davion Mitchell, and a 2025 first round pick that is top 10 protected from the Golden State Warriors. A trade that's not super surprising. Obviously, we've talked at length over the last couple of months that Wiggins to the Miami Heat and send Jimmy to the Warriors was a very realistic possibility, and that's exactly what we got. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these assets one by one and kind of explain what they mean and how the Heat got there to get this person, right? So starting with Andrew Wiggins. I was a little hesitant personally on acquiring him just because he does have a long-term contract. He's making $26 million this year, $28 million next year, and he has a $30 million player option the year after that. Now, Andrew Wiggins is only 29, but he does turn 30 years old in a couple of weeks, so he doesn't exactly fit the timeline, but he's also not super old. In addition to that final year of his player option, he may or may not accept. I really think it depends how well he plays this year and next year, because at that time, I guess he'll be 31 years old, and that's around the age where some players might want to opt out and re-sign for one more long 4-year deal. Or if Wiggins is not playing too well, maybe he will opt into that final year of his player option and get that $30 million. Now, on the Miami Heat, he clearly has a nice fit. You know, he's a 38% three-point shooting this year. He's an excellent defender. He was awesome in the finals guarding Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. These are all things the Miami Heat need. I think he fits pretty seamlessly into that starting lineup. You could do, I guess, Tyler and Duncan and Wiggins and Bam and Ware. Although personally, I might even slide Wiggins to the 2 and put Nikola Jovic at the 3. Finally, after all these years of going small ball, you could go very big. And I think having Andrew Wiggins could allow you to do that because he has been a pretty decent three-point shooter over the last couple of seasons. And obviously his perimeter of attack defense would complement Tyler Hero very well in the backcourt. So as far as fit on this Miami Heat team, it's pretty perfect. I don't necessarily think he's a needle mover, which is why, truthfully, I wasn't too keen on getting his extra money. Because I said I would have rather had maybe the expiring of Brandon Ingram, who went to the Toronto Raptors. I would have maybe had the shorter years of Chris Middleton and Bobby Portis, whose contracts end next season. I didn't really want the extra money of Andrew Wiggins. That being said, if he was to accept that $30 million player option 3 seasons from now, I guess you got the rest of this season and then 2 more, I do think that $30 million could be a movable contract just because it's expiring, and a lot of times expiring contracts are not that hard to move because there's a lot of teams out there that is willing to just take on money that will be gone at the end of the season. If Andrew Wiggins is playing well, it's certainly not a hard contract to move just because $30 million is really not that much money for a guy of his caliber the way he's playing right now. I mean, guys that are playing the way Wiggins is playing now, which is about 18 points per game, 38% from 3 on 6 attempts, solid defender. There's guys making like $40+ million. And right now, Wiggins is only making 26. So it's not a terrible contract. And therefore, I understand why the Miami Heat did that. And I am excited to see what he can bring to the team this year because I think it does help make them a very competitive roster in terms of they can maybe beat anybody in a game. In a series. I certainly don't think they can beat Boston now. I don't think they can beat the Cavaliers, but I think it can make them competitive to maybe win a couple of games, maybe win a first round series, depending on who their matchup is. So he's a good player. It's certainly a good fit for this Miami Heat team. Now, Kyle Anderson is someone that the Heat got yesterday, and then he was supposed to be immediately rerouted to the Toronto Raptors, but then that trade fell through, and then the Heat were looking to move on from Kyle Anderson today, and they couldn't do it. So as of right now, Kyle Anderson is stuck on the Miami Heat. Now, the reason the Heat wanted to move him is so they could shed his salary and kind of get off of get under the first apron and under the luxury tax. Because this year, Kyle Anderson is making $9 million, and he's making $9 million next year as well. And then he has another $9 million team option the following year. So it's not quite 3 years left. It's really 2 years because they are likely to terminate that team option in that final year. So it's not a super long contract, but ideally, I wouldn't have wanted to take on that money for this year and next year. I would have rather kind of get someone who was off the books, or if the Heat were able to trade Kyle Anderson. The reason that trade probably fell through is because the Raptors were cool with it, and then they saw that they were very close to getting Brandon Ingram and kind of had to put a halt on the Kyle Anderson trade. Now, from a Heat front office perspective, I think it's ridiculous that you had a trade get announced and agreed to that wasn't agreed to. I think that's very bad management. Now, who leaked that trade? I don't know. But that's just very bad management, because now you got Kyle Anderson on the Heat thinking, damn, y'all try to trade me, but he's still here. I don't know. It's just a bit of a awkward situation. As far as fit on this team, I don't think there is one. He's not a super old player. I believe he's like 30, 31 as well, but he's not a very good shooter. He's got the ugliest hitch in his jump shot you ever seen, which I'm not a fan of. He's very slow. He is a bit of a versatile player. He's okay at a lot of things, just not great at anything. But he's a nice vet piece. I think he'll be an okay locker room guy. So if he's here for now, it's fine. But I don't really anticipate him to get minutes over Jaime Jaquez or Haywood Highsmith or Pelle Larsson or anybody like that. Now, moving on to Davion Mitchell. The reason I believe the Heat have Davion Mitchell now is because they were not able to trade Kyle Anderson. Because we'll go back to yesterday now, where you might remember the Heat actually traded for PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker was sent over to Miami in the initial deal from Utah when the Heat sent out Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors. I feel bad for PJ Tucker. He posted on Instagram yesterday the video of The Undertaker rising from the dead because he was super excited to be back. We know he loves the Miami Heat. And then less than 12 hours later, he was shipped off to he was shipped off to Toronto for Davion Mitchell. Now, Davion Mitchell's a good player. We'll get into that. But I believe the reason the Heat did this trade is, again, to save money. Because the Heat were not able to send off Kyle Anderson's $9 million, they had to shed salary elsewhere. So the way the Heat were able to do that is by sending away PJ Tucker's $11.5 million and getting back Davion Mitchell's $6 million contract. Both of those guys are expiring. So basically, the Heat were able to save $6 million this season by sending out PJ and getting Davion Mitchell back. The unfortunate part about this is the Heat had to attach a second-round pick to PJ Tucker in order to incentivize the Toronto Raptors to take on his contract. The reason that's unfortunate is because in the initial Jimmy Butler deal that we heard yesterday, we heard that a second-round pick was sent out to the Jazz for PJ Tucker. Now, I don't know if that's the Heat's first-round pick. I've heard it speculated, but I haven't seen it personally reported. Now, if that was the Heat's second-round pick, then that means that the Heat traded a second-round pick to get PJ Tucker and then traded another second-round pick to get rid of PJ Tucker, which means in totality, they got Davion Mitchell for PJ Tucker and 2 second-round picks. As much as I like Davion Mitchell as a player, that is not good value. And I am tired of attaching assets to shed salary. We've seen this many times with Miami Heat. We've seen it with KZ Okpala to get rid of KZ Okpala. We saw it with Dwayne Dedmon. He attached a second-round pick to get rid of Dwayne Dedmon. We saw it with Kyle Lowry. They attached the first-round pick to Kyle Lowry to get rid of that final year of his contract. You could say it was to bring in Terry Rozier, but Lord knows we wish that never happened. But the point is, the Heat obviously don't have a lot of assets. So when you are getting rid of assets to shed salary, it's just a very, very unfortunate situation. Now, that being said, Davion Mitchell certainly provides something to this team that the Heat could use. He is on the final year of his deal, making $6 million, so he may or may not re-sign, which I guess it would be worse if he didn't re-sign, because now you traded a second-round pick just to get rid of, or just to not even keep him, I guess, the following year, which would be a complete waste. But for now, Davion Mitchell is someone who brings elite point of attack defense. There's something that the Heat are desperately needing, especially since Drew Smith's health is up in the air. Obviously, Drew Smith is out for the rest of this season with the torn ACL. We wish him a speedy recovery, but who knows if Drew Smith will be ready by the start of next year? We don't know. And you're losing a lot of perimeter defense with Drew Smith, and you're getting a lot of that by bringing in Davion Mitchell. The guy's name is literally off night, because when he is guarding you, you are going to have an off night. It's one of my favorite nicknames in the entire league. It really is. So don't get it twisted. Davion Mitchell is an elite point of attack defender. And now you have a guy like maybe he starts next to Tyler Hero, because obviously that defense can kind of complement Tyler Hero. Or maybe he comes off the bench to try to slow down a Tyrese Maxey or Jalen Brunson. And now you have a few pieces that you can throw out there defensively, like Hayward Highsmith. Of course, you got Bam Adebayo. You got Khalil Ware on the backside. And maybe the Heat could have a closing lineup of Tyler and Davion and Haywood or Wiggins and Bam and Ware. That's a very, very solid defensive lineup to close games, because obviously Wiggins is a great perimeter defender as well. So he certainly gives the Heat some options there to really get their defense back up, because it's been pretty abysmal over the last few weeks. We know Spoelstra looks like he's having a heart attack in every post-game press conference when he looks at the box score and sees that they gave up 135 points to the Zach LaVine-less Chicago Bulls just a couple games ago. We know the defense has been bad, and it hasn't been their identity. And what this trade deadline did is it got them two very elite defenders. Andrew Wiggins and Davion Mitchell both rank in the top 10 in opponent player field goal percentage, meaning that their opponents shoot way worse than their average when they're guarded by Wiggins and Davion Mitchell. So that's all awesome. I love what the Heat did there as far as that. But that being said, with regards to Davion Mitchell, as good as he is defensively, he is awful offensively. He's not known as a scorer, only averaging about 5 points per game. It's just not what he does. Now, I want to give him some credit, because I think he played like 44 games for the Raptors this year, started half of them. So he was playing, but he was only playing 24 minutes a night. But in those 24 minutes, he was averaging about 5 assists a game. That's pretty good. And of course, the Heat need a true point guard. They need a playmaker. That's not Davion Mitchell. But if he is averaging 5 assists a game, that tells me that he can at least facilitate enough to maybe start next to Tyler Hero in the backcourt, or get some spot minutes next to him coming off the bench. And also, in addition to the passing, he is shooting 36% from three this year, I think on like 3 attempts, which is not bad. You know, it's not a guy that's completely unreliable out there. He's not Tony Allen, because you can't play guys like Tony Allen in today's NBA that shoot 12% from three. You can't do it. So if Davion Mitchell's able to shoot 36%, I remember he killed the Heat one game this year from three. I was very mad. But if he's able to continue shooting 36% from three on a few attempts, that's good enough to at least keep him out there on the court. And I am excited to see what he brings to this Heat team and everything he does defensively for sure. Now, the last asset that we got to talk about is the 2025 top 10 protected first-round pick from the Golden State Warriors. Now, that pick is top 10 protected, meaning if the Warriors finish in the top 10, they get to keep the pick. If that happens, the Warriors get the pick, or the Heat get the pick the following year. It's also top 10 protected in 2026. If the Warriors finish in the top 10 again in 2026, then it becomes unprotected in 2027. It's highly unlikely, but I hope the Warriors are god-awful for the next couple of seasons. Not just because I'm petty against Jimmy Butler. I'm not. I kind of wish Jimmy well, but at the same time, I hope that team just falls apart, because that would be really funny too. By the way, last night I just bought tickets to the Heat Warriors game, because the Warriors come to town on March 25th, and it's going to be a movie. So if y'all come to the game, make sure y'all come say what's up, because it's going to be wild. I had to get my tickets last night because I'd imagine that the prices are just going to absolutely skyrocket. For some context, I got section 101, row 13 for like $400, which is a lot still, I know. But it's like the last tickets in that section that weren't jacked up to like $1,000 already. So I seen those tickets. I had to scoop them up. And I will, I'll give Jimmy an applause. I hope that he give him a tribute video. But that's not what I don't want to make this video talking about Jimmy, because Jimmy really deserves his own career Heat tenure retrospective video where we kind of pay our tributes, because obviously he's a Heat legend regardless of how it ended. So we'll save all the Jimmy talk for another video. I'll dedicate something solely to him. But anyways, back to I don't even know what we're talking about. Back to the first round pick, right? If the Warriors are bad the next 2 seasons, it becomes unprotected in 2027. And that's when Steph Curry's 38, Jimmy will be 37. It's likely the Warriors are not a great team in 2027, meaning that Heat pick could be very valuable. But like I said, that's unlikely to happen because right now the Warriors are in the 10th spot, but they're only 2 games back of like 6, and they're only 2 games up of like 12. But with Jimmy Butler, you would expect them to be a much better team, and they probably will finish somewhere in the top 8, meaning they make the playoffs. They will not finish in the top 10 of the draft. And then, of course, the Heat will get their draft pick. Now, best case scenario, the Heat still get a lottery pick, because if the Suns finish anywhere from 11 to 14, the Heat still get that pick, which, of course, is in the lottery. And I've been told this is a pretty loaded draft. So depending on how the things finish with the Suns or the Warriors this year, if they can finish in that 11 to 14 range, oh, that will be a nice, valuable pick for the Miami Heat. Maybe they keep it, maybe they don't. I don't know. But also what having this pick does is it does provide you some additional flexibility because of the Stephian rule. You can't not have first-round picks in back-to-back seasons. The Heat, as it stands right now, do not have their own first-round pick, but it is lottery protected. So if the Heat was to miss the playoffs, then they would have their own first-round pick. So there is potential that the Heat can actually have 2 first-round picks this year. But I don't want to talk too much on that because that's where things start to get confusing. And then I'm have to stop this video and re-record all over again. Point is, there's a lot of fluid parts right now. And we will have a lot of answers over the course of the next couple of weeks and really by the end of the season when we see kind of how all these teams finish out. So let me go through my notes real quick, make sure that I didn't miss anything. We got the Heat package. We got the PJ Tucker aspect of the whole thing. I want to note that PJ Tucker, when the trade is finalized, he won't have actually ever been traded to Miami. It would have been like he was directly rerouted to the Toronto Raptors, meaning that if the Raptors buy him out, the Heat can then still be eligible to sign PJ Tucker on the buyout market. Why the Heat would do that, I don't know. They already got their old veteran in the locker room in Kevin Love. I don't think they also need PJ Tucker, but some Heat fans have been advocating for that just because we like PJ Tucker, of course, and so do I. But I don't think that will happen. What else we got? I want to talk about some of the tax implications now, because if the Heat were able to trade Kyle Anderson, the Heat would have been under the luxury tax. But because instead of that, they are now keeping Kyle Anderson, and the only salary setting move they did was trade PJ for Davion Mitchell, the Heat are now over the luxury tax, but they're still under the first apron. So there's a few things you got to look at when you're talking about salary tax or salary cap. You got the luxury tax, which is the bottom level. You got the first apron, and you got the second apron. You don't want to be over the second apron. That's why the Suns weren't able to trade Bradley Beal. Well, that's one of the reasons, because Beal also has that no trade clause. But teams like Boston, Phoenix, they're all over the second apron, and it heavily limits what they can do with regards to team building. So you don't want to avoid that. The Heat were not a second apron team. However, they were over the first apron, which does have lots of implications when it comes to team building. For example, you're very limited in what you can do in the buyout market, and I do anticipate there to be some good players in this buyout market. So ideally, if the Heat could have avoided to be over the first apron, they needed to, and that's exactly what they did by trading PJ Tucker for Davion Mitchell. Because now the Heat are a few $1 million below the first apron, even though they are above the luxury tax. So they're basically right in the middle of the luxury tax and the first apron. The Heat, we know in the final hour of the trade deadline, we're trying to make one more move to shed some salary, whether it was get off of Duncan Robinson's contract, whether it was moving Kyle Anderson, whether it was moving Haywood Highsmith $6 million. We know they were trying to avoid that luxury tax. They just weren't able to do it. But from a Heat fan perspective, that doesn't really matter to us as much. The only downside to being over the luxury tax is there's a thing called repeaters tax, where if you're over the luxury tax for a certain number of years in a row, you now pay like a multiplied amounts of money in luxury tax, which as a fan, we don't care about, because we don't care about Mickey Harrison's pockets. Like, does Mickey Harrison think all of us Heat fans are going to celebrate and cheer and joy when he gets to save more money? No, we don't care about Mickey's pockets because he's a billionaire. So the good news is, though, as Heat fans, we do want to be under that first apron, so we're not limited in the buyout market, which we're not limited. So as a fan aspect, that is a big win that the Heat were able to shed enough salary to get under the first apron. So that's kind of the general synopsis of the tax implications of this trade deadline for the Miami Heat. Now, there's a few things that I wish the Heat could have did that they didn't. For example, I still think the Heat are mid, so I would have tried to get some players that maybe could have got some assets attached to them. The one guy I was really looking at was Jusuf Nurkic. Nurkic was traded over to the Charlotte Hornets with a first-round pick. So basically, the Suns attached the first-round pick to Nurkic to incentivize the Hornets to take on that contract. I would have loved if the Heat can do that, because with or without Nurkic, the Heat are the same level of team. So why not take on that $18 million Nurkic has this year and $19 million he has the next year, and then get that first-round pick attached? It's not like that's a ton of money. It's only the rest of this year and next year on that deal. Nurkic also could have fulfilled a role as a backup center, and then the Heat would have had a first-round pick, an extra asset, because the Heat need to continue getting assets. Free agency does not exist anymore like it used to, and I want the Heat to actually have assets this time to be in the game when the next star becomes available. Whether it's Trae Young or Giannis or whoever the hell it may be, the Heat need assets. So I would have did a trade like that, but they didn't get it done. There was a reporting today that the Heat did have discussions regarding Kevin Durant, but apparently the Suns wanted young pieces and picks, which I guess is too much. Like, I don't know. Personally, as a Heat fan, I would have gave up Jovic. I would have gave up the picks. I would have gave up Jaime Jaquez. Khalil Ware I would have been hesitant on, just because I don't know if Kevin Durant would have been enough to make us a contender. And if that's the case, you're going to be in this, like I'm saying, if you trade Khalil Ware, you're going to have the same problems, because let's say you trade Ware to get KD, you're going to have a starting lineup of like Tyler, Duncan, KD, Haywood, and Bam. You're still going to be small. Like, I don't think you can win a championship with Haywood Highsmith as your starting power forward. You can't win a championship in today's game being that small. Small ball, it was a thing a few years ago. Teams are getting bigger. They're getting these more athletic, versatile bigs. That's, I think, what you need. And if the Heat couldn't get size in Jimmy Butler's 5 years here, I don't think they'd be able to do it in KD's next couple of years here, because there's not going to be any quality bigs on the free agent market. If there was, you're not going to have money to sign them. You're not going to have the assets to acquire a big. So you would have had KD. You would have been really good. But I still don't think you would have had the size to compete or an avenue to get that size. So I would have been hesitant on Khalil Ware, but maybe you could have talked me into it. I don't know. But regardless, the Heat couldn't get KD. Ramon Shelburne was on ESPN saying the vibes in the Suns locker room are toxic. So maybe the Heat can revisit the KD saga once again for like the fourth time now in the offseason, and maybe they can get something done then. Another guy to keep your eye on with regards to stars is Trae Young. The Atlanta Hawks were very clearly sellers today. They sent DeAndre Hunter to the Cavs for a few second-round picks and Karis LeVert. Massive W for the Cavs. He's exactly what they need. A team that was already scary got even more scarier. And then the Hawks also send away Bogdan Bogdanovic. Unfortunately for them, they don't have their first-round pick this year, so they're probably going to miss the playoffs and not have their first-round pick because the Spurs have it. So you telling me the Spurs just got De'Aaron Fox and now they're going to have a lottery pick in this upcoming draft? That's going to be scary. So hopefully the Spurs have the worst lottery luck ever. They've had enough lottery luck. Don't let them get it this year, because that team has the potential to be unstoppable. But very clearly, Trae Young's future is murky with the Atlanta Hawks, which is the report that just came out before I started hitting record. So maybe he's a guy that the Heat can visit in the offseason and try to trade as well. Maybe use that Wiggins contract, maybe use the first-round pick that we got and try to get Trae Young, because I would love him on this team. The Heat needs help offensively, and Trae Young is an offensive machine. Of course, defensively, the fit in the backcourt with him and Tyler Hero is not great, but you can find a guy like Davion Mitchell to maybe share some minutes with to help combat that. You got Haywood Highsmith. As long as you got Bam and Khalil Ware and that back line, I do think that's pretty good interior defense to try to make up for the lack of perimeter defense that you'd get if you had Trae Young. But that's just a name to keep an eye on. And then the only other thing that might have some implications for the Heat is one of the buzzer beater deals before the deadline was Marcus Smart was traded. He was sent over to the Wizards with a first-round pick. So that's another guy that the Grizzlies were trying to shed salary, just like the Suns were trying to do with Nurkic. They attached a first-round pick to get rid of him. Marcus Smart makes $20 million this year and $21 million next year. I've heard some talks that the Wizards might buy him out, but didn't really think you could buy a guy out if he wasn't on the last year of his deal. And maybe you can, but if so, that's going to be a lot of money. So I'm not even sure if Marcus Smart is technically a buyout candidate. But if he is, that's when being under that second apron is massive for the Miami Heat. Because, of course, if they can get a guy like Marcus Smart on the buyout deadline, you're getting another guard that can play defense, one is not a great shooter, but he's had his moments. Somehow Marcus Smart's like the all-time leader for threes in a game for the Celtics, which is crazy. But if they can get a guy like him, that'll certainly be interesting. I don't have a ton of other buyout guys off the mind. We'll dedicate some more time to that when the time comes for it. Oh, here, I just refreshed Twitter to see if there was any last-minute news that happened since we started hitting record. And the top one is from Yossi Goslin that says potential buyout candidates for the Miami Heat include guys like Malcolm Brogdon, who is exactly what the Heat need. He just can't stay healthy, but he's an excellent shooter and point guard. Bruce Brown, who obviously the Heat have been connected to forever, University of Miami greats. You got Ben Simmons, who they need a facilitator. Hey, put Ben Simmons at point guard, plays defense, can facilitate. Put Tyler Hero at the 2, Jovic at the 3, Bam at the 4, Ware at the 5. You got 4 guys in your starting lineup over 6'10". Listen, I know people don't like Ben Simmons, but on that buyout, he is going to be cheap. And if he was this team's starting point guard, oh, that would be scary. Ben Simmons would be the perfect fit in this starting lineup. Another guy is Bojan Bogdanovic, very old, but decent shooter. I don't even know where he's at nowadays, but let me just finish scrolling through Twitter real quick here. That looks like pretty much everything, aside from Marvin Bagley being traded and Chuma Okeke being signed. Excuse me. But yeah, that's about it. So we'll keep we'll keep an eye out for things, and I'll be coming to y'all with news as it comes along. Leave all y'all comments and thoughts down below. I'm very curious to hear what y'all think. I said it in yesterday's video. Overall, I guess I would grade this trade a C for the Miami Heat. I just don't really feel like they picked a direction, but they did get some interesting pieces. But like the video, subscribe. I'm on the grind to hit 7K subs. The Heat play again tomorrow versus the Nets, and I got to get a video out about that and individual videos out about Wiggins and Mitchell and maybe Kyle Anderson. I don't know. I got to get to work, so make sure y'all subscribe so you don't miss it. See y'all on the next one. Peace out.
Look, pull up in your city trying to get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.